Hello, this is an advanced guide to Flight of Nova Intersatellite missions, and this is a new type of mission enabled by Flight of Nova build 150, which I'm currently playing a preview of, but this video won't be public until the build is available for you to download. So if you don't already have that version, make sure you update the game. And in this version of the game, we have now the ability to easily move between the moons of our main planet, which is called NVA 31. And there's one of them right there. That moon is called Telios. I suspect that one will look a little bit different in the version of the game that releases, and that's why we're not going to be going there today. We'll be going to the other moon, which I think is pretty finalized in this version, and then we'll be coming back to this planet, and I'll be describing what I do all the way along the way. The full process for doing that takes a good 20 minutes in either direction, so there's going to be a lot of edits so that you don't have to sit through all of that. But I am going to fully describe the entire process that I use to routinely and without a whole lot of thought get between all the different moons that are available now. And this process doesn't require a whole lot of advanced knowledge of orbital mechanics or planetary transfer windows or any of that. I'm just going to describe a process that works, and you can just follow that process. Unfortunately, the result of that is that I won't be describing why the process works or how I came about this process for how to transfer between celestial bodies or CBs. I'm just going to describe it as a finished process that works. So if you are curious as to why or any more details about it, feel free to ask me on Discord, and I'll answer any questions that you might have. The first part of the process involves getting to a space station, so that's why I'm doing that now. And I want to be really clear that when I say this is an advanced guide, it is quite an advanced guide. So you really do need to have a lot of familiarity with flying in the simulator before you start this process. Getting to a station, for example, should be second nature to you. Also, if you haven't seen my guide on traveling quickly using hypersonic gliding, that would be something you should be pretty familiar with doing before starting this guide. And I do have the playlist linked in the description. I also have a text guide on Steam, a text version of this video, which I'll link in the description of the video. So it does require a fair amount of skill in flying and in sort of understanding what it is that you're supposed to do and remembering a complex sequence of tasks. But it does not require you to be a rocket scientist. You don't need to care about orbital mechanics. However, be aware that in this version of the game, orbital mechanics of the planets is a real thing. They do orbit, and you do have to take that into account especially if you want to get to the actual other planets, which do still exist. Argonel and Kalit do still exist in this version of the game. They are now even more difficult to reach than they were before because they orbit, and so in order to get to them, it's not just a matter of pointing at them and burning towards them anymore, like it used to be, which was already pretty difficult because it took 2 to 4 days to get there. But now, in addition to taking 2 to 4 days to get there, you have to also plan out the trajectory and find them in the first place, which is fairly difficult to do, and so I'm not going to be describing that in this guide whatsoever. I do briefly mention it in my text guide, but this is about getting to and from the moons, and the difference, in addition to them being much closer, is that they are intended to be played on. They are fully implemented celestial bodies that you are supposed to get to. You're supposed to play there. Missions work. And of course they're kind of the highlight of the update. Now you can get to the moons in any game mode, but ideally you'd want to get there in rogue mode, because doing that will unlock the ability to get missions there. And so that's what I'm doing. The other reason why rogue mode is nice is that it has the FMS, which has the nav panel, and the nav panel can be kind of useful for for navigation, including for intersatellite navigation. So here we are at Station Montana, and the first thing that we need to do is identify our target CB. Now, fortunately, that's a lot easier than it was back when we had very distant CBs to go to. They are easily visible moons in orbit of NVA 31. And if you sit on the ground and watch them, you can see them orbit around. They orbit quite fast. They have they're pretty close to the planet. They're a lot closer than our moon is to us, and that means that their orbit time is a lot faster than the month that our moon takes to orbit. And so here we have a view of, let's see if I can turn around and look at it. No, I'm not going to be able to. There we go. Of Ashir. And I can tell that it's Ashir just by looking at the size of it. I'll in the text guide, I'll post some pictures so that you can get more familiar with them. It's a little bit difficult to see the coloration because we're looking at the dark side of it right now, being on the side of both CBs away from the sun. But it's a lot easier to tell the difference between them if you can see the coloration. But just based on the size, I know that's Ashir. And that's the one that I want to get to. And so I'm going to head that way. And I want you to look at the rough distance between the prograde vector on screen and the edge of the disk of the moon. And just notice that difference. And that is just about where you want to be when you start your burn for the moon, or your return burn. roughly that distance will get you where you want to go, and you should burn directly at the prograde indicator, but then don't move down to track that the indicator. You can just point in the direction that you were pointing. Now, as I'm accelerating, you can see that the inclination is slowly diverging off into the negatives, and we don't want that to happen. We want inclination to be 0 as much as possible. So I'm gonna use my left and right yaw to control that inclination. And of course that's dependent on how your ship is oriented, but you know, I've oriented the ship so that my head is facing away from the planet, and I'm going to do that consistently in this video to maintain that sort of frame of reference. But the point is to remain near the equator, and so you want your latitude to be as close to 0 as possible. You also want your inclination to be as close to 0 as possible, and I'm not going to go into the specifics of why that is. It's just the best way to do it, and so I'm just recommending that you do that. And if you do, you should have not too much of a problem following the rest of these steps. But keep in mind that those two things are very important. You want latitude to be 0, you want inclination to be 0. And we've been accelerating for quite a while, and our fuel is approaching the point where we want to turn the engines off. I do recommend burning until you get to about 65% fuel remaining. So we're almost there. And we're about 65% fuel remaining. Now, if we had any inclination that we hadn't killed off, you could use the left and right RCS at this point to kill off that inclination. And you can see that we're accelerating very rapidly away from our main planet, NVA 31. And we'll be on our way to the moon for about 20 minutes. Now, at some point during the course of this travel, what's going to happen is that the gravitational influence of the planet behind us, in this case NVA 31, is going to be sort of overridden by the gravity of the CB in front of us, and that's what's called a sphere of influence transition. And when we move between spheres of influence, the game lets us know that in a couple of ways. One is that you see on my upper right display, it says gravity, and that number is going down rapidly. That's in meters per second. And underneath that, it says N31. If we come up here, you can see the same thing, celestial body N31. Those two places will change to the name of whatever CB you're in the sphere of influence of. So right now we're very much in the sphere of influence of NVA 31. But as we get closer to this moon, Ashir, eventually we'll get close enough that its gravity is primary and it will become our sphere of influence. If you're closely watching the orbital parameters at that time, or any of the flight instruments, you'll also probably notice that those shift very dramatically, because they'll all suddenly be showing readings relative to the new planet, or the new CB, I mean. And anyway, the point of saying that is that at the moment that we transition between spheres of influence, we want to make a course correction burn. And we want to do it then because that's when our instruments will give us enough detail to do it. We don't have a way of calculating our periapsis to the new CB until we're in its sphere of influence. That's not something that our navigation computer has the capability of doing in the game, and so we need to wait until we're actually in the sphere of influence of the moon to make those course corrections. And that's also why it's important to sort of visually get our course relatively correct, because we don't want to waste a bunch of fuel during the sphere of influence transition. Now the idea, I'm just going to use my boresight to point for a second. The prograde vector right now is pointing sort of at the disk of the moon. Ideally, you'd want it to be pointing right at the edge of the moon. And it doesn't actually matter which side it is. It could be that side or this side. However, at some point in the future, when planetary rotation is added, you will want to be aware of the rotation of the planet and aim for the side that is sort of moving away from you, because that will just make it easier to land there. But at the moment we don't have that concern, so I'm just going to pick a side. And I've arbitrarily picked this one. That's the destination. You want to sort of aim for the exact side, and actually what you want is to just miss. And I'll go into more detail later on as to what you're supposed to do after you just miss. But for now, just be aware that the intention, what we're trying to do is appear that we're just going to fly by the right side of the moon. And you can see that I haven't really done that perfectly. That means I'm going to have to make a substantial course correction burn. But I'm going to wait until we have our sphere of influence transition first, in order to do that, so that we only have to make one course correction burn. Now, of course, it is actually more efficient to do your course corrections farther away. So once you're, kind of out here away from your origin planet, and its gravity isn't curving your path too much anymore, you might decide, well, I can see that I'm going to be off and I want to move my trajectory a little bit. But keep in mind that the moons do orbit, and that affects the moon's position in the sky. If you're coming back from a moon, it also affects your expectation of what the planet is going to do, because you'll have that sideways motion that you may not be thinking about from the moon's orbit. So just be aware that if you make a course correction now, that might not stay where you think it's going to be. Anyway, that's everything I have to say for now, so we're going to skip ahead to the sphere of influence transition.
Attention, destination threshold.
And there it is. We just hit our SOI transition. Now, in the version of the game that I'm playing right now, Ashir's sphere of influence is too big. because of some legacy stuff that hasn't been fixed yet. But by the time this is released, its sphere of influence should be a lot smaller. I think it will end up being about 5,000 or 6,000 kilometers. So you'll be a lot closer when you get to this point. But you can see that I did do my visual aiming pretty well. The inclination is 0.02, and we'll just go ahead and fix that with RCS. And that should be 0. And the important thing is the periapsis. I think about 100 kilometers is pretty good. So actually, honestly, due to luck more than anything, that was like almost exactly right. So I can just fix it with RCS. But if it's significant, you can use the main engines, and I'm actually going to just lower it a bit more to about 40 kilometers with the main engines to demonstrate that. So there, do that pretty easily. And of course, you want to aim in line with the ecliptic of the sun, that like the line that the planets and the sun are all in, and the moons, they all orbit along the ecliptic, very, very close to it. And keep inclination at 0. And there we go. Well, actually, let me just get periapsis down to exactly 40, just for the sake of being consistent. Periapsis 40. That is a very specific number for Ashir because it's airless. So with airless target CBs, you want to have your periapsis be essentially as low as it's safe to be. So I'm going to set it at 40. I'm actually going to make it lower later on. But for this approach phase, I'm going to set it to 40. And for all CBs, you want the inclination to be 0. Later on in this video, I'm going to talk about returning to NVA 31. I usually set a periapsis at this point, returning to NVA 31 around 200 kilometers. And if you want a table with all of these numbers, I've created that in my text guide, which you can go see in the description. So anyway, the next time we're going to need to do anything is when we're descending through 1,000 kilometers altitude. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to that. Okay, here we are. You can see we're a lot closer to our target CB. It's filling up most of the screen now. And what we're going to do, you can see our periapsis is still about 40 kilometers. That's good. Our inclination is still 0. That's good. We're going to turn around and face our retrograde vector there. And just as we get to about 1,000 kilometers, we're going to start burning towards that. Now, what we want to do is make sure that our periapsis descends. In the case of Ashir, we want that to get basically all the way down to about 10 kilometers. Ashir is an airless moon, and so it has, there's no reason not to get very close to the surface. The terrain on Ashir rises up to about 5-ish kilometers above the mean sea level. So I shoot for 10 kilometers at this point for safety. And also just because being up a little high gives us a bit more visibility. As we continue our burn, our periapsis is getting down nicely. We're making sure that our inclination stays at 0. If the inclination starts to drift, you can use either the RCS translate or yaw the whole ship so that the main engines affect the inclination. And as our periapsis approaches 10, we're going to start angling up because we don't want to go too far below that. We do obviously need to continue slowing down, and we can see the surface of the moon passing beneath us now. I think that's very spectacular. It looks even more impressive when you're doing this in daylight. But we're definitely going to see the daylight side of this moon a little bit later on, so don't worry about that. Anyway, our inclination has drifted just a little bit, so I'm going to correct that while making sure that periapsis stays right around 10. Now the downside of this moon being airless is that there's no opportunity for aerobraking whatsoever. We do need to use our rocket engines and therefore our fuel to slow down the entire way. So there is no... and just a note, our vertical speed is starting to go up. So we need to dramatically pitch down to stay around 10 kilometers. What that means is that we passed our periapsis before we got to, or before we got into orbit, before our orbit captured. So that can potentially happen. But now that we're at the periapsis, we can just use the vertical speed indicator, try and keep that close to 0, to just stay around 10 kilometers. And there we go. That's once you're captured, you get into a stable orbit of Ashir very fast because its gravity is quite low. And now that we're captured and we have a roughly circular orbit, I'm just going to fully circularize. Just do that real fast. And the process of circularizing your orbit should hopefully be pretty familiar to you from just doing activities around NVA 31. If it's not, then essentially get to your periapsis, make your vertical speed 0, and then slow down or speed up to make your apoapsis about the same as your periapsis. And that actually would have been a good base to stop at, but I was busy talking and I didn't quite recognize that would have been a good target. Oh, but now I see another one on the horizon that just came into view at the bottom of our map, so we'll wait until that base that's just now at the bottom of the mini-map. We're going to pass right over that. So, we'll wait for that one. And I'll actually just go ahead and skip ahead to that. Okay, so we're getting pretty close now. Maybe we can see it in our short range radar. Yes, we can. So, thing to note is that our orbital velocity on Ashir is very low compared to NVA 31. Notice how slow we're going, which means that we can get pretty close to this base before we start decelerating. I'm going to start doing it at about 20 kilometers. Oh, but keeping in mind that we're about 10 kilometers in altitude, so that's 30 kilometers on the display. So I'm just trying to keep my vertical speed about 0 here, and this is sort of basic landing and low altitude flight on Ashir, but that is very different from anything that you'll have experienced on NVA 31. So I'm going to go ahead and go over it all. Couple of things to note about low altitude flight on Ashir that only apply to Ashir and don't even apply to the other moon is that because it's airless, it's treated as space vacuum the entire time, even when you're right next to the ground. So that means, for one thing, that if you want to go into VTOL mode, you have to hold down the VTOL toggle key. You can see on the left there's that little circle that fills up. I'll just show it a couple times. You have to hold it down. And the other thing is that the RCS thrusters are actually available. All of them, including the translation controls, are available the entire time down to the ground. And actually on Ashir, they're even powerful enough to overcome the weight of the spacecraft, and so you can lift off, and theoretically you could even get all the way to orbit using only RCS. If you had the patience for it, it would take a while to do that, but you can. It also means that you can land entirely on RCS if you want to, and I'm going to demonstrate that because I think it's a neat thing to see. Something that's common to both of the moons is that because they have either 0 or very little atmosphere, when you're near the ground, the light scattering is quite low, and so it feels darker than NVA 31 does. I hope at some point in the future maybe we get some landing lights or base floodlights or something. But there's enough sort of scatter illumination that you can see anyway, even though it's not really realistic that that would exist. But you kind of need it to see, so that's fine, right? Anyway, as we get down here, is this a landable building? This might not be a landable building, actually. I might have to adjust my course here. Yeah, okay. Let's go over there instead. Because the gravity is so low, it's pretty easy to accidentally get going really high up off the surface without intending to. So keep that in mind. And I'm going to just align with the horizon and try and finish mostly on RCS. I'm actually going to slow down with mains here because it's just sort of... Oops. Well, that's awkward. Anyway, now I'm going to just go ahead and finish mostly on RCS. First of all, by using VTOL to get close to 0 meters per second vertical speed, align with the horizon, and then just use our RCS the rest of the way. And there we go. There's our outbound intersatellite transfer completed. And we've successfully landed. And from here you can play around on the moon, do missions. You've unlocked the this moon for play. And whenever you feel like going back to our home planet, we can do that too. And that's going to be the next part of this guide. So now we're ready to go back to NVA 31. The first thing we need to do is get to a station. At the moment that I'm recording this, this moon only has one station around it. I don't know if that's going to be the final state or if it will get more, but at the moment it does just have the one. So we're going to intercept it. And intercepting an orbital station on an airless moon is a lot easier than it is on NVA 31. Not least of which because the VTOL thrusters by themselves are easily capable of getting us into orbit by themselves if we wanted to do that. Also because the moon, or the station I mean, is very slow. It orbits at a speed that we can reach quite trivially in these craft. And so we'll get there very fast. I'll just get up to this station quick. And dock to it. And then we'll be on our way home. Just a note about our orbital station intercept here. Because we're ascending from the moon and the station is very low, we don't get the normal relative velocity page on that bottom left screen. You can see the distance though, at least, and that's good enough. And we'll get that relative velocity here in just a second. There it is. It's not that you have to be really close to the station, it's that you have to be a certain height above the terrain. And just find the station. There it is. And the process for returning home is pretty similar to the process for getting out here in the first place, so I am going to skip most of it. I'll just show the initial part and then skip forward to the aerobraking, which is the exciting part. But all the bits in between are pretty much the same. So here we are. Just one tip is from Ashir going back to N31 specifically for that specific transfer. I would recommend just basically putting the prograde vector right over the top, or right over the edge, I mean, of the planet. You'll get usually pretty good results doing that. And as for why that is, it's a combination of the fact that the moon has very low gravity and just the way it moves relative to the planet. So, oops, I'm actually pointing too low. I kind of shouldn't have been doing that, but oh well. We can always do a course correction if we need to. We do want to keep our inclination as close to 0 as possible, though, throughout the entire burn. And that's an important point, is that you don't want to just keep, or you don't want to just get inclination to 0 after the burn is done. Ideally, you want it to be 0 or as close to 0 as you can get it throughout the entire burn. And we seem pretty stable right now, so I'm just gonna enjoy the view. If you do this, you can still monitor your inclination in the upper left, and you can use RCS to correct that if you'd like to do that. There we go. And we can watch our fuel spend here as well. Reminder that we're looking for 65% fuel. And I find that that works pretty well in any of the whoops, wrong way. Any of the ships that we have available, 65% fuel is pretty safe. So we're gonna get to that, to 65, and then we're gonna skip way ahead. I'm just going to go past the mid-course correction and all of that, and skip ahead to our capture burn before aerobraking. And there we go. Our departure burn, our transfer burn is done. And you can enjoy the view of the moon receding behind you. And we are gonna skip forward. Alright, so here we are, almost back home. Got a good view of our home planet. Coming into the screens below us, and we're just gonna go ahead and do the same thing as we did at Ashir. Oh, that's amazing. And we have a perfect view of a solar eclipse behind us. That's not something that you normally are gonna have at this time. That's just pure coincidence that happened. And oh, that looks pretty amazing. Great. So with that background, we're gonna start our capture burn here. And it's the same thing, except that our periapsis goal is a little different. We still want inclination to stay 0, but our target periapsis here is going to be 70 kilometers. We want about 70 kilometers because that's a good height in the atmosphere for aerobraking. And because we have sorry, honestly I was a little distracted by the background there. You shouldn't let the periapsis go through the target like that, but if you do, you can point up to get it back. And so ideally we just want to be around 12 kilometers per second at this point. That's what we want to slow down to. Now if you are in the EX5, you can go a lot faster than that. You can really do this at about 15 kilometers per second if you want to, because it has much higher thermal tolerance. But the other two ships have less ability to tolerate heat, and so you need to slow down more before you enter the atmosphere. And of course, if you want to, you can also just completely stop without using aerobraking at all, the same as we did on Ashir. But there's no reason to be inefficient like that. We may as well use the atmosphere. And there is another benefit to doing aerobraking that you don't get if you just slow down with main engines, and that will become apparent here in just a second. But for now, we just need to wait just a couple of minutes for atmospheric contact. Or entry interface. There we are. The very tops of the atmosphere. And it's starting to affect our direction of motion. And during this first part, during the descent, we need to just let the atmosphere, let our spacecraft penetrate the atmosphere. So we want to face pretty much straight towards prograde, and that will happen automatically. And at this point, you want to be sure that your periapsis is right around 70. Obviously, you should have checked that earlier, but if it's not 70 now, you really don't want it to be much lower than that. Because if it is, then that hull temperature up there is not going to stop at a survivable value. It's going to just keep climbing and climbing, and you will explode. But what I'm going to do is set trim to maximum possible spacecraft nose up. Now that we're here near the bottom of our dive, near our periapsis. And then I'm going to have to use additional manual pitch inputs. And the goal is to keep our vertical speed... Whoops, too much. Oh, now here's a good demonstration. Now this is actually fine. We're too fast to keep our vertical speed low with just aerodynamics. So we'd actually slow down and it would be okay, but in case it's not, you can use VTOL to get back down there. Now you can, you don't have to use VTOL if you set up your periapsis correctly. Maybe 68 or 69 kilometers is a little bit better than 70, but I like to do 70 just for safety. And about 45-ish degrees is the maximum downward force that you're going to get from doing this. So you just want to stay around that range as long as it's necessary. to slow down. And there we are. We've captured into orbit. I think I'll just go ahead and help our periapsis down a little bit. Again, ideally you shouldn't need to use thrust at this point at all. But in case you do, that's how you do it. Just sparingly. You don't want to overshoot your periapsis. You don't want to push that too far down, or make your vertical speed too far into the negative, or else again you run into the risk of overheating. So you can watch our speed come down. Our periapsis will slowly descend as well as our vertical speed drops. And you can also watch that orbital diagram on the upper right, MFD, become more and more circular and less elliptical. Or eccentric. As we slow down and get captured into the atmosphere. And at this point now I've completely let go of the pitch input, and I'm just using pitch trim. It's now sufficient to hold us in the atmosphere. And we are soon going to have to actually start reducing that trim as well. But for now, maximum spacecraft nose up is working out. And while we're decelerating here, I will point out the advantage that I meant earlier to this method of decelerating, of using aerobraking, which is that since we're below 80 kilometers altitude, we have visibility of the ground bases, and so we can make a targeted landing. And my hull temperature is getting a little high, so I'm just going to adjust my descent rate manually a bit before I readjust the trim. And you get that warning sound when you're close to taking damage. We still have a pretty good amount of buffer zone before that's a concern. But that sound indicates that you're close to overspeeding. And Okay, we want to hold it right about there, that altitude to continue decelerating safely. And actually now if you look at the orbital diagram on the right, it's nearly circular. So we no longer have to hold ourselves down, we now can fly as normal. And what I'm going to do at this point is wait for a base to appear in front of us on the long range display. Now that we're mostly circularized, the next base that appears is the one that I'm going to land at. There we go. So if you are familiar with my, or if you've seen my video, or if you're just familiar with the concept from somewhere else of the hypersonic greater than escape velocity inverted gliding, the rest of this video should be no problem for you. Should be stuff you've already seen. So I'm just going to just quickly finish off the process of slowing down and landing. But for the most part, if you've got this far, you're done. So I hope that this video has been helpful, that it helps you get to the moons and back and have fun playing Flight of Nova. And if it did, let me know in the comments, or hit me up on Discord in the Flight of Nova Discord server, and let me know that you got to the moon, and maybe post a screenshot. All right. Thank you for watching, and good luck, and have fun.